Alrighty, so Chris Mathys, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
It's a great pleasure, thank you.
So you're running for Congressional District 22, specifically against Representative David Valadao. Before we get into all of the politics, we want to know more about you. So take away the politics for now. Just tell us who you are. Who is Chris Mathys?
Well, I grew up in Sanger, a little farm town by Fresno, joined the Army, proud to have served in Panama. I came back and actually worked in Bakersfield for a couple of years, and then went back to Fresno and ended up going to Fresno State, and now I'm in the cattle business. We run cattle west of the 5 freeway north of Kalinga. Love our country, just want to make sure that we still have a place where Americans can work hard and prosper.
How did that all translate to actually running for office, though? Because loving our country, right, believing in certain politics, very different than actually deciding to run for office.
Well, you know, I personally am a strong supporter of President Trump, and when David Valadao decided to vote for the impeachment, I couldn't understand that. You know, we're fortunate enough to have a conservative president as Republicans, and when that happened, that told me that we needed a change.
That gets me into my next question. Now introduce yourself politics-wise, right? You already mentioned why you are running, but so is it true that your campaign essentially seems to be all about running against Valadao because he voted to impeach former President Trump?
Right, and the frustrating part is he didn't just vote for or should I say vote for the impeachment to basically fire President Trump. He continues to insult him. He won't even support the opening of the Biden impeachment. He voted for making same-sex marriage a constitutional right. I mean, he's not a Republican. And here in the Valley, we need a conservative. We need someone that's going to represent our values, make sure our oil and gas industry prospers, and that our farmers can continue to prosper.
So you go by conservative Republican. Like you said, the Valley, especially Kern County, we're historically red. We've always been. But recently, we're getting more and more purple. So your campaign, your political stance, do you feel like it stands a good chance against David Valadao and the other Democrats who will be running alongside you? Well,
most definitely. I think what Americans want is they want a place that they can live and not have to worry about inflation and interest rates. Mr. Valadao supports the Ukraine aid. Why are we spending $45 billion of American taxpayer money into Ukraine when here in America we have the needs we have? We have families that can't afford gas at $5 a gallon. We have people that are homeless, but we have $45 billion of our money. Mr. Valadao supports sending it to the Ukraine. I don't understand that.
And I promise we'll get more into the issues on Capitol Hill later, but to focus on the Central Valley and you for now. Home is Fresno, right? It's a little ways up, so being a little far from Kern, Bakersfield, how will that affect your campaigning here? Can we still expect to see you out and about here?
Well, actually, I'm from Firebaugh, which is a farm town west of Fresno, and the district is a long district. It covers a good portion of Kings County, which isn't far from us, and then goes into Tulare and Kern County. I feel like Kern County is coming home for the simple reason I did live here, and so I think that we can cover the area very well. You know, it's a big, long district, but you have to be there to represent everyone.
So being out on the ground, interacting with constituents, is that a big part of who you are? Is that a big part of your campaigning?
Yeah, well, we're spending a lot of time. We have a booth at the Kern County Fair all week, next week too, and it's a way to reach people. I've also spent a lot of time in the neighborhoods. I honestly think that people in District 22 need someone that they've met in person, not relying on television ads and commercials. I think it's more important that you can interact with people face to face, like I am with you.
Yeah. And for your 2024 campaign, sir, what are the top 3 items on your agenda?
Well, I think the first thing and most important thing to me is to see that President Trump gets elected president and that we have a majority of Republicans that support him. Again, that's why I'm running against David Valadao. He does not support President Trump and would vote to impeach him again if he had the opportunity.
And the next 2 items?
Yeah, well, the most important thing is that we can get this cost of living where people can afford to live in America. They don't have inflation rates, exceeding 40% in the last 4 years. Also make sure that instead of focusing so much on the Ukraine and in other places, let's focus on our backyard. Put America first. That is what's important to me. Put District 22, the people that work hard here, put them first instead of all these other things that really aren't helping us.
And speaking about certain issues, here in Kern County, crime and homelessness are very big concerns for voters here. And when it comes to both, a lot of people are blaming Governor Gavin Newsom, especially for the petty retail thefts that have been increasing recently. They say we need harsher crackdowns, we need stricter laws, and Representative Valadao is actually pushing for such actions from the governor. Is that something you would agree?
Well, there has to be a consequence. I feel for members of law enforcement that make these arrests, and then these same people are released 2 or 3 days later. Why are our prisons half full? Why are they closing prisons? The bottom line is, if you violate someone's right in Kern County, you should go to jail and pay the price and not be released so you can commit that same crime again, a week later. And that's what's happening. There is no consequence. These people are getting released in the streets. They're going after people, stealing from people. And the only way to do it is tough law enforcement, respect our police, and make sure people pay the price when they violate our rights and steal from us.
So in District 22, what are some of those concrete plans and hopes you have in terms of lessening crime for your constituents?
Well, let's put it this way. First of all, let's make sure that our prisons are full. Let's make sure there's a consequence when a crime's committed. And let's ensure that our southern border is secure. A lot of our criminal activity relates to unchecked a border where people come across. We don't know where they're from. We don't know their intentions. We have a federal government that cannot control our southern border. That has to stop.
I remember the last time around you mentioned that you support finishing the border wall, putting an end to quote-unquote sanctuary cities. Is that something you still stand by?
Most definitely. Under President Trump, we had Title 42. What happened there is you had to go through the whole vetting process to come to America offshore. Then when that was done, you were allowed to enter. Under the Biden administration, you walk across the border, you sign up for benefits, you live here. That, I don't believe, is a solid immigration policy.
And transitioning now to homelessness, again, another big topic and concern for people here in Kern County. Representative Valadao said in a teletown hall that he believes the solution lies more at the statewide level. It's not something individual cities, counties can really manage. What's your reaction to that comment?
Well, that's a typical political answer. It's always someone else's responsibility. If you're a member of Congress, you have a direct responsibility to make sure your people that live in your district are safe and to make sure that the homeless problem is addressed. And to have people with criminal records roaming our streets and stealing from us is not a sound policy. Again, if there's a consequence, then a lot of these people that are causing these problems will be incarcerated and serve the time instead of being out in the open where they can continue to harass our people.
But homelessness itself isn't necessarily considered a crime. So in terms of crime, you mentioned harsher crackdowns, making sure jails are full, but those aren't necessarily ways to tackle homelessness. So I'm curious, when it comes to homelessness, what specific resolutions you may have?
Well, I think the two big issues with homelessness are number one is drug use. Over 50% of people that are homeless are dependent on some kind of drug or a controlled substance. Getting back to the border again, how is all of this stuff coming over? It's coming because we have a weak border. The less drugs, the less problems. And so, the first solution to me is to cut the drug traffic, to cut the drug trade, and at that same time make sure the people that are homeless either get the mental health that they need, and if they do have a criminal record and they're committing crimes, they should go to jail.
And how does this year's campaign differ from the last campaign? Is there anything you did last time around that you would do differently this time? What did you learn from 2022?
Well, I think what happened last time is there were other people running, and I think this time it's going to be a clear choice between myself and David Valadao. We were the top vote getter in Tulare County. We only lost by 2.5%. So I believe that this time we'll prevail, and I think people want a different president. They want a conservative president, and I'm the congressman that can help make that happen.
So it's really a race between the two Republican candidates, is what you're saying?
In the primary, definitely.
So Hurtado, Salas, you don't think they really have much of a chance?
Well, no, I think they will take and garner the Democratic vote, and I'm hoping to get the conservative Republican vote, the American Independent vote, and then the no party preference vote, which are all three very important.
I want to talk more about those two Democratic candidates. Who do you think will ultimately get the Democratic support and win the primary?
It's hard for me to tell. I know that Melissa Hurtado is in the Senate, so she obviously has that strength. But then Rudy has some large endorsements from Sacramento, so let the best person win.
Former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is actually endorsing Rudy Salas this time around. And based on reports I've read, it seemed that Pelosi, according to Ad Impact, Nancy Pelosi aligned Super PAC purchased over $110,000 in airtime in the Bakersfield TV market to quote-unquote prop up Mathys against Valadao. I want to touch a little more on that. What's your reaction to that? Is that true? Did that happen? Did that boost your profile in 2022?
Well, first of all, I can't control what Nancy Pelosi does, and personally, I wouldn't want her endorsement. I don't think she was effective as a speaker, and I think a lot of the problems San Francisco has is because of her. As far as Democrats, Republicans, I want to work for the district, regardless of what someone's party is. When I was on the city council there in Fresno, I was proud of my record, having been able to help all Americans instead of putting people in boxes,
Why do you think Nancy Pelosi is endorsing Salas?
I don't understand, and if I was Salas, I wouldn't mention that too often. I don't think Nancy Pelosi is an endorsement that is going to help him much.
And the last election cycle, some Democrats were saying they wanted to push for you because they thought you would be an easier opponent for whoever won the primary, whichever Democratic candidate won the primary. So I'm curious, this time around, do you believe you stand a good chance against David Valadao? Do you believe you're a strong candidate?
Most definitely. I think a lot of the reason that some Democrats do support me is, I am bilingual, yo hablo español. I have family from Central America, and so I think I've been able to effectively communicate with Latinos with my knowledge of Spanish and just having grown up, in a farming community.
So that Democratic support, despite what some reports say, you don't think it's because they think you're an easier opponent?
Absolutely not. I think, whatever they decide to do is their business. But at the end of the day, people want a conservative member of Congress that will support President Trump and that will fight for the needs of our valley, make sure that the cost of living goes down, and frankly, make sure instead of sending all the money to the Ukraine, that we need it right here. America has to be first finally. And that includes everyone that lives in the 22nd Congressional District.
I want to touch a little bit more on your last run because it was pretty close between you and David Valadao. Did you accept the loss right away when you lost the primary? Because I know voter integrity is also a very big issue for you.
One thing I've learned in the Army, you get knocked down, you get back up, and I'm not somebody that's going to be a sore loser. If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. You got to move on either way.
So then how does voter integrity come into the picture?
Well, that's a good question. I do think that we need to make sure only American citizens vote, and we need to make sure that we verify people's ID before they vote, because if we don't do that, then there's a lack of voter integrity.
And you're an avid supporter of voting in person at the polls, is that correct?
Most definitely. I think it's important you show your ID, they make sure you're an American citizen, and then you have because having the honor of voting is a privilege, and it's a privilege for American citizens.
And this time around, how do you think the race is going to play out?
I think we got a real good shot. Frankly, people want to change. They want a new president, and they want a country that they can feel safe in, and a country they can afford to live in.
And to kind of summarize the issues we've talked about so far, again, your campaign focuses on the fact that Valadao voted to impeach former President Trump. The basis of your campaign itself, that doesn't get any work done for voters. So what can you do for voters?
Well, like I said, I do have a record, not a criminal record, but a record having served first as a soldier in the Army. I'm very proud of that. And from there, being on the Fresno City Council, I have a proven track record of completing many important infrastructure projects, made sure that people that wanted to get permits were able to get them. I'm a business-friendly person. I've been self-employed my whole life. And I'm somebody that I believe people in District 22 can call, regardless of their issue, and be accessible. Mr. Valadao doesn't show up anywhere. He's not on any debates, any forums. He's doing everything from Washington, D.C., people in District 22 need a local candidate they can meet and that someone they can count on to represent them.
Let's touch on David Valadao a little bit more. So whether on the impeachment inquiry against President Biden or the looming government shutdown, Valadao has said he doesn't want to divide the country more than it already is. Are you not worried that your beliefs, your campaign goals may divide the country?
Well, my question is this. He voted to impeach President Trump without any evidence or a trial, but now when it comes to President Biden, he won't even look at the evidence. That's not dividing that country. That's showing that his allegiance is to progressive President Biden and not to the conservative values of District 22. You can't call President Trump unfit for office and then expect to be a Republican and represent the district, and that's what Mr. Valadao did.
Are you not worried, though, that your beliefs, your campaign goals might create more partisanship? Again, because you are aligned with former President Donald Trump, and I'm not taking any sides here. I'm just saying from what we've seen, it's very much been the right versus the left.
Well, I could just tell you all of my material includes my phone number. I will talk to anyone about any issue. Try reaching David Valadao. Good luck.
Last time around, you told 17 News that Valadao voted, as a Republican, voted to impeach a Republican president, which doesn't look good for the party, doesn't look good on him. So then do you think it's fine for Republican congressional members to vote to impeach a Democratic president?
The way I look at it is it's all based on, is there a reason to impeach? There was no reason whatsoever to impeach President Trump. He did a fantastic job. The witch hunt is continuing. Every trial he goes on, they're pressing charges against him. It's time to leave him alone, look at his record, and give him a chance to represent America again.
So for President Biden, you do believe there is a reason to impeach?
I think he needs to be investigated. I mean, if he has a son that gets a firearm by embellishing his drug use, there's a problem there. And obviously, there's a problem with his son being on a board of directors in the Ukraine on a gas company. How did he get there? Has to do with that. So yes, it definitely needs to be investigated.
Mid-interview check-in, are we still doing okay? Do we need to change anything?
No, you want some singles, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that'd be great, okay. And then getting into campaign finance, money is always a big part of politics. So last election cycle, Valadao had much more money on hand to spend. He likely will this time as well. Does money affect the strength of your campaign?
Well, where I'm blessed is, first of all, I am self-employed and I do have time to work hard. And one thing that money can't buy is working in the district, walking door to door, being at the fair for 2 weeks. And at the end of the day, I think personal contact and being able to meet people, look at them in the eye and find out what's on their concerns is more important than money. And it's always money, money, money. But at the end of the day, what matters is who's going to be a stronger representative. And I believe I'm that person.
I'm just curious, so are there any major endorsements you've received in the past or expect to receive
I
this
have
time
the
around?
best possible endorsement I can in this race. The gentleman that got 3,000 votes in Hanford, and keep in mind, I only lost by about 900. He's endorsed me. And he had almost 4,000 votes. So if I can get even half of his votes, we have a tremendous shot of winning this. And so I'm honored to have Adam Medeiros' endorsement in this race. And to me, it is the most important race because if you look at the last election, how many votes he got.
I just want to compare the numbers because the number I have is a little over 1,200 votes. The 900, where did you?
That was initially, and then when the final count came in, it was kind of back and forth. But 1,200 votes is 2.5%. That's tight, especially when I was outfunded 10 to 1. He spent 10 times more money than I did. And he's been in office, for almost 10 years. So.
And I want to ask, is climate change a big part of your agenda? Is it something you believe in? Because I know you want more fracking permits, or you at least have vouched for those in the past, right? You want more domestic oil production, but Governor Gavin Newsom just launched a lawsuit against big oil, right? Fossil fuels, carbon emissions, those are very big conversations recently in California. So my question, climate change, is it something you believe in? Is it a big part of your agenda?
Personally, I think we're always going to have hot times and cold times. The worst thing we can do right now is attack our oil and gas industry because Kern County especially is dependent on oil and gas for employment. America is dependent on oil and gas to be a strong energy independent nation. And by Governor Newsom attacking our oil companies, he's attacking Americans, and he's attacking anyone that drives a car that runs by gas. Let's let the oil and gas companies do their job. Let's give them the permits. Let's become energy independent. Why are we importing half of the oil that we use in California from Ecuador? It makes no sense when we got black gold right here under our soil. Time to back off and leave the oil companies alone.
And that's something you would push for should you be elected into office?
100%.
And my last few questions are going to focus on Mr. Trump and Speaker McCarthy. But before we get to that, focusing on some more issues, I know right to bear arms, right, was a big part of your campaign last time. You're also pro-life, separation of church and the state, right? Can we touch on all of those a bit more? Again, are those still a big part of your campaign?
Well, yeah, very much so. You know, the bottom line is, you know, being a soldier myself, having been in the Army and learning from my dad, the one thing that we cannot ever take away is Americans' right to keep and bear arms. Not only that right is to defend us from our families or protect their safety, but also from our government. And frankly, this government's getting too big. So every American has a right to keep and bear arms, and I will fight for that right.
We are in California, though. I know it's a very blue state. It always has been, right? And when it comes to the Second Amendment, a lot of Californians aren't necessarily fans of that. So does that make your job a little more difficult when you're pushing for that?
You know, I think most Americans, men and women, want that right to defend their families, and I think the Second Amendment gives them that right, and that right needs to be protected.
And you may know that statewide, there is a large push for a parental notification policy, which is essentially called a gender disclosure policy, right? If a child at school decides to go by different pronouns, right? Or use a bathroom that isn't aligned with the sex on their official records. The schools are notified to, or are required to notify parents under this policy. It's very controversial. The Attorney General of California has launched a lawsuit against one of those school districts. It's actually a big topic here in Kern County as well. Our Board of Education is pushing for a parental notification policy. Is this something you would support? Is this something you would push for? Parents
need to know what our children are doing, our children in school. And parents need to be notified anything that impacts their children. If the child wants to change their pronoun, the first thing that person needs to know is mom and dad. Most definitely.
And let's talk about COVID-19. There have been more cases recently. There are talks about potential masking mandates coming back, right? Where do you stand on masking mandates, vaccination requirements?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that this country made was to force Americans to wear masks, force Americans to stay away from church proceedings, make Americans stay home, make kids stay home. It's overdone, it's overrun. Leave it alone, let Americans be free, stop the mandates, stop the vaccination mandates, and let people take care of themselves. We don't need Mr. Fauci to take care of us.
And where do you stand on water storage and making sure that we have an endless water supply?
Well, let me give you some good news. The Westlands Water District just announced that they have reached half of their goals for the recharge. And so I think we need to continue to, any opportunity we have to increase water storage. I know they're talking about raising the Shasta Dam. That would be a tremendous benefit. The Temperance Flat project at Millerton Lake died under Mr. Valadao's watch. There's no reason for that. We need water. We need water storage. I mean, this last year, we had so much water that we sent to the ocean. Had we had a better storage capacity, we could have kept that, because maybe next year we won't have the same amount of rain. And so water storage is extremely important for farmers, because the more water that they have to pump, the more expensive it is.
Final few questions from me. How are you feeling about Mr. Trump now? We've touched on him briefly, but the 4 indictments, yet he's still running for president and he's leading in the polls.
You know, I think your record is what people look at, and I think he had a fantastic record as president of the United States. America was booming, gas prices were cheap, we didn't have inflation, we didn't have all of this crazy stuff going on in the Ukraine, and he had a great Supreme Court And so I think it's time to put him back and let him continue making America a great country.
I know the Trump agenda is what you hope to follow once you're elected into office as well. Should another Democratic president be elected, and you're elected into office, and District 22 remains under GOP rule, how will you follow the Trump agenda?
Well, you just have to fight, as the Congress is doing now, for the values that you believe are important. And I think Mr. Trump is going to win. I think he will be the next president, and I think that his platform and his hard work will continue to help America.
How do we feel about the other presidential candidates?
At this point, I think Donald Trump is the most qualified, not only from his history as president, but his history as a businessman.
And you may have seen at the GOP booth at the Kern County Fair, they have jars with each that essentially represent each candidate,
the beads.
Right? And people can drop beans inside. I believe it was DeSantis and Trump were pretty close. Chris Christie had 0 pistachios the last time I checked. Is that kind of that represents how Kern County residents are feeling about those candidates? Is that something you agree with? What is your reaction to seeing who's popular?
Well, I think, first of all, Chris Christie, his campaign is bashing President Trump, and so that's why he has no pistachios. And the bottom line is, if you look at who has the most pistachios, it's President Trump. And the reason is because I think people were very happy with his performance.
And have you ever heard from President Trump at all, interacted with him? Will you be reaching out for potential endorsements this time around?
Most definitely. I did have the honor of attending a Save America rally in Florida and at his property in Doral, and we'll continue to reach out. He's a busy man, and we clearly will be honored if we can get his endorsement to have it. So.
Again, reports I read said that you reached out last time around too, but you didn't hear back. Yet President Trump did endorse other California congressional districts. What is your reaction to that?
We, again, are pushing hard, and it's something that's work in progress. You got to keep at it.
And Speaker McCarthy is going to be the last topic we talk about. Where do you stand on the government shutdown? Is it something you would support? Is it something you want to avoid at all costs?
No, I think our government spends way too much money. There is still no strong push for limiting the funding of the war in the Ukraine, and I think that the people that are fighting for less taxes and less foreign aid need to be respected, because they care about America's pocketbook. And at the end of the day, they are spending our tax dollars in Washington, and somebody needs to keep an eye on those tax dollars.
Do you think Speaker McCarthy is too moderate? And do you think he spends his time appeasing the Democrats one day and the far-righters another day?
Mr. McCarthy, I have a great respect for him. He has a tough job, and I think he's doing the best he can with what he has to work with.
Do you think he's too moderate? How do your political ideologies align?
I think he's shown that he supports President Trump, and so to me, he's a conservative.
How would you work alongside him?
I respect the man. We both are products of Cal State schools. He went to Cal State Bakersfield. He was a political science major. He had his own business before he got into politics, so I think him and I would get along very well.
How do you think he's handling everything that's happening on Capitol Hill right now?
With the pressure he's under, I think he's doing the best he can.
I think that's it from me. Chris, is there anything else you'd like to add on current topics, your campaign?
We'll see you at the fair.
Alrighty, thank you.